Kaieteur Radio, keeping you informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Burbies 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
Guyana is now a full-fledged oil-producing nation. But how much do you know about this valuable yet finite resource? On our radio program, Guyana's Oil and You, we strike at the heart of every issue with informed views and credible data. The time is now for you to arm yourself with insightful knowledge on your oil wealth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of Guyana's Oil and You. I'm your hostess, senior journalist at Kaieteur News, Kiana Wilburg, and tonight we're talking once again about LCDS 2030. This evening, however, we won't be looking at the oil and gas aspect or the forest carbon aspect of it, or we would not be examining some of the technical aspects of it, but rather we'll be looking at what LCDS 2030 means for citizens. Therefore, tonight's topic is LCDS 2030, rethinking our approach to development while ensuring citizens benefit. Now, to start off tonight's discussion, we have three very beautiful but very intelligent women in our society. They're very versed on these matters. We have Ms. Monica Sharma, coordinator of the Amerindian Land Titling Project at the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. We have Ms. Vanessa Ben. She's the lead coordinator for LCDS 2030 consultations. And we have Ms. Vanelda Harris. She's a representative at the Office of the Prime Minister. Ladies, welcome to the program, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kiana.
All right, so without further ado, I'll head straight into our topic tonight, which is about how LCDS impacts the lives of Guyanese. And we know that LCDS, it's not a new topic. It's been around since 2010. And we've seen it do a lot. It has had some impact on the lives of Guyanese. With that, I'd let Ms. Sharma open our conversation tonight on how LCDS 2010 has delivered benefits for Amerindian communities.
Well, thank you, Kiana, and good evening to our listeners, both in Guyana and in our diaspora, as I know they all tune in. I'm very happy to be here next to these ladies to share a little bit about how the LCDS has been directly impacting and benefiting Guyanese. Let me just start by saying that although we say LCDS 2010, it was actually in June 2009 that the LCDS was launched. And that's where it all started. And so it's been around for some time. And as a matter of fact, later in that same year, in November of 2009, the government of Guyana and the government of Norway signed a historic agreement where Guyana will be paid for its standing forests. That's the basis on which the LCDS was developed. Correct? So now specifically for the Amerindians or First Peoples, they are a direct beneficiary of monies that have already been earned thus far. Now, from 2009 to 2015, I think Guyana would have earned in excess of $210 million through this partnership with the government of Norway. And actually, it was the people of Norway who voted for this for this to happen.
Okay.
So it's coming with the backing of an entire population of Norway. So with this money that we earned during this period, 2009 to 2015, it was the policy of the government, the leadership of Guyana, that decided that our First Peoples were going to be amongst the first to benefit from the earnings. And so we had the Guyana, the GRIF fund that was set up to manage. This is just a financing facility that was set up to manage the funds that were being, to hold the funds that were being earned through Norway, right? And so these funds, some of these funds are being utilized under the ALT project, the Amerindian Land Titling Project, right? Which we're discussing here tonight. And so the Amerindian Land Titling Project basically ensures that Amerindians or First Peoples have legal rights to the lands that they occupy. It relieves the financial burden on Amerindian communities for obtaining this legal document. Okay, so for you to have a title, a certificate of title, which is a legal document to say that you have boundaries, your land is demarcated by actual physical boundaries on the ground, right? You have to pay for a survey to be done, for example, right? And so this could be a very costly exercise for our First Peoples. And so the Amerindian Land Titling Project aims to relieve that financial burden from communities to having the demarcation paid for and done by the Lands and Surveys Commission, who's the authority to do so, right? So far, I mean, under the project specifically, 21 communities have been demarcated up until 2020, at the end of 2020. And after that, 5 additional communities have been demarcated. That is just specifically under the ALT project, right? I've spoken so far just about demarcation and land titling, which is the end product of it all. But it starts a little bit before that. The land titling process starts a little bit before that, where there is another legal document that villages do have before they get to a land title. So they can be issued an absolute grant, first of all, which is the absolute grant is another legal document that speaks to the description of the land that they occupy. Correct? So, but this is just a description of the land. The next and final step after that would be the issuance of the certificate of title. So basically, the ALT project, first of all, relieves that burden, that financial burden for having this exercise done, and it gives the it really empowers the Amerindian village or community with legal documentation, legal rights now to their land that they can leverage for further economic growth, right? Because this title belongs to the community now. It's a communal title. It doesn't belong to one person of the village or community. It belongs to the entire community. And they can leverage that for other development projects that they wish to have within their community. They can also, have with legal rights and physical boundaries that are actually, marking their portion of land, they can protect their boundaries as well. In a legal, it can stand up in a court of law, anyone trying to encroach upon their land. And we have a lot, when it comes to areas like mining and forestry, and even without those activities going on, you do have, encroachment on land for various reasons. But having a certificate of title, right, a legal document, or having an absolute grant, gives you that right, that power right? To defend your land, to, stand up and say, this is my territory, this belongs to the people of X community or X village, and we have the right to govern within this boundary, right? So I think that is like one of the main pillars of the Amerindian Land Titling Project, and I think we've seen good progress on the ground, albeit that the project hasn't gone as fast as we would have liked it to, right? But we are making progress. And again, it is a commitment of the government of Guyana to ensure that Amerindians have this legal document and legal ownership of their land, right? Also, with land, we always have dispute, right? And this is not just for land owned, by Amerindians. On the coast, everywhere we have, neighbors are going to fight each other. You 12 inches over here, your fence is, and 2 inches in my area and so forth. So there's always going to be dispute. And another pillar of the ALT project is to first of all empower again Amerindian leadership, right, on resolving issues on the ground, resolving issues with their neighbors, resolving issues with miners or those involved in agriculture, or anyone that is operating near and within their land. Because why is this important? Because to settle disputes that get to the level of the court, again, is another cost factor, right? It's going to cost villages a lot if every issue that has to deal with land, every dispute gets to the level of the court. And so we're trying to avoid that. Sometimes it's a simple thing. Sometimes there's a generational issue that has just been passed on and on and on, and we've just we can't get a resolution because this is, what I know from my grandparents and so forth. And if we can get people to talk about these issues and amicably resolve these problems on the ground, then you're saving the communities a lot of money without having to move to the court to settle some things, right? So the project has done a lot of training in conflict resolution, and there's a grievance redress mechanism that's set up to actually help to deal with such issues and try to avoid getting to the point where they have to go to court to resolve them. So that is another major pillar under the ALT project. And again, the project has trained over 200 persons in communities across every single region of Guyana so far in conflict resolution. So I think that's another added benefit for the Guyanese population, but specifically our First Peoples.
Thank you for that contribution, Ms. Sharma. And I noted that you spoke a lot about especially how the foundation of LCDS from the mother document has been able to impact the lives, empower the indigenous communities. And you said about 21 communities have benefited so far since 2020.
Under the ALT project, 21 communities have been demarcated. So the project it was signed in 2013. It didn't become operational until 2014. Okay. So we did see, in the beginning of the project, we did see like an acceleration of efforts. So if you look back, you'd see like 2014, 2015, a lot was being done on the ground to move things along. There was a bit of a lull in activities, I would say post 2016, 2017, 2018. We didn't see so much happening on the ground in the project. There was a bit of slow movement for different reasons. Policy direction may have been one of them. And then 2020, of course, we were hit with the COVID pandemic, and so there was actually no chance of the project actually moving into communities to do any groundwork. And so actually, yeah, 2020 was a very bad year for the project. And so we picked up again, coming down towards the end of 2020, the project saw a resurgence of, movement on the ground. And yeah, so we're at the point where currently the project has technically come to an end on paper. December of 2021 marked the end of the project, but we are proposing an extension. Currently, it seems very favorable because, again, it's the policy and the commitment of the government of Guyana to achieve in its entirety what the project originally set out to do. So the project originally set out to have 68 communities titled under the ALT project.
Okay. So the objective of the extension is to ensure that you cover that basis.
Correct. That we reach that target of 68.
Okay. Now, I want to follow up on that and just ascertain how LCDS 2030 will build on those achievements. Or is it only that specific objective LCDS 2030 would be looking at?
So LCDS 2030, goes beyond. I mean, ALT is specific just for land titling, but Amerindian development is what is at the forefront of LCDS, at least 2010, I'm sure 2030 as well, right? So that is not going to change. Amerindian development will continue. And the government, again, the leadership of Guyana has said that at least 15% of all monies earned under the LCDS goes directly to Amerindian development. So whether it's land titling, whether it's access to technology, whichever project is necessary for identified as necessary for Amerindian development, 15% of the monies earned under LCDS goes directly towards Amerindian development. But LCDS 2030 is not just about Amerindian development either, right? It's much broader. It's development of Guyana. And so, but I'm going to speak specifically to our First Peoples. Whilst they will benefit directly from this 15%, the remaining 85% that's going to be going to go towards overall development for all Guyanese, Amerindians will be benefiting from that too. So we will see, and the LCDS 2030 document, lays it out. We will see development across all the sectors, whether it be health, education, infrastructure, agriculture, ICT, technology, and so forth. And so Amerindians, again, will benefit from all of this development as well. So LCDS 2030 goes beyond ALT project. There's just one project that looks at Amerindian development, giving them rights to their land. But yes, LCDS 2030 goes way beyond that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sharma. And Ms. Harris, I'd like to turn the spotlight on you now, and just pivoting off of what Ms. Sharma said, LCDS 2030 really providing that platform for us to expand and develop other sectors. And digital infrastructure, our digital sector is definitely an area that needs developing, especially with Guyana being a petro state. So with that, I'd like to ask for your contribution on how LCDS 2030 will play a role in improving our digital infrastructure.
Okay, thank you for having us, Kiana. So, as you rightly mentioned, our digital infrastructure is very important for us now that we are an oil and gas producing nation. So, really, for us to advance and ensure that our economy gets where it needs to be and keep up with the rest of the world, the other first world countries, and the services that we'll be offering, we need to ensure that our people are also developed. So I can speak about, I'll start with training. We have a lot of training that has been ongoing in communities across the country that falls under our outreach of the Office of the Prime Minister. So we have the Industry and Innovation Unit. They have been targeting communities, especially the vulnerable areas in the 10 administrative regions of the country. I'd advise Guyanese who would hear that, the Office of the Prime Minister's team is in your area, come out and utilize that opportunity, because we have lots of people in vulnerable areas who, some of them don't even know how to use a computer. So this project really, when you go out into the communities, you realize the gap that you have. And our LCDS 2030 is focused on the hinterland communities. Monica spoke about the Amerindian communities. They are our first peoples, and it is critical that they benefit from what LCDS has to offer. They're the ones who live in the forest. They're the ones who sustain and protect our forests. And so ICT hubs are being developed in those areas. That falls under, we have the ICT Access and E-Services Program for HPRCs, which stands for Hinterland, Poor and Remote Communities. So you will see 200 hubs being developed in identified areas across the country. And those areas would have been identified based on the vulnerability of the area there, and how many persons would be able to benefit from the internet connectivity. As you know, there is a big gap between internet access on the coast versus in the hinterland communities. So this is a very, very critical project for Guyana right now. You'll see each hub will have 20 laptops that will be allocated there. And we're not just putting down the hubs, but we have persons that are there ensuring that the persons in the communities, as I mentioned, some of them they don't know how to use a computer, and they will be trained, so they will gain that knowledge. So it's not just about putting down a hub and you have the infrastructure there, but it's also equipping our people to be able to maneuver now in this technological age. We have, I know the current government, the PPPC, has mentioned in their manifesto the reinstatement of the one laptop per family project. And as you know, in LCDS 2010, this was identified and outlined in that document. However, because of the change in government, that project was stopped, which saw lots of vulnerable households who would have been able to benefit. I believe the number was 90,000 households should have been able to benefit from that project, but many of them were deprived of that because of the change in government where that project was stopped. So I believe up until March 2013, over 26,800 persons were already given laptops with internet connectivity, and this was a project that persons were really looking forward to. So it was very unfortunate that it was stopped, but I know that in the manifesto of the PPPC, that is something that I promised up until 2025 to have that project reinstated, and I think that Guyanese are looking forward to it. You would have seen us as soon as the PPPC took office in 2020, the telecom sector was liberalized. That was stalled from when there was a change in government again, that was stalled. That the framework for that bill was already there prior to the APNU AFC assuming office. So the framework was there, but when the PPPC demitted office, no movement was done. So I think you recall, just approximately 2 months into government, the telecom sector was liberalized, and that has now created the opportunity for more investors to come, have more services provided as it relates to telecoms. Now, the benefits that consumers are going to be able to reap from that is that you're going to have more competition. With more competition, it forces the providers to ensure that you have quality service provided, and they have to be held accountable for that. So you'll see we're looking to have more bandwidth provided, but a reduced cost. So there are plans for incentives for companies who are looking to invest in the telecom sector, especially with fiber optic cables and so forth. So that is something to look forward to. You would have also seen the VAT on data being removed, which a lot of persons were excited about. There's no VAT on data being paid. We had to pay that prior to 2020. Under the previous administration. So we have seen lots done already as it relates to getting us the digital infrastructure that we need, preparing our people for that transformation and really advancing into the future. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. The e-governance, I want to talk about e-governance. The government has plans to ensure that public services are provided, whether it's healthcare, you would have seen progress being made in security, whether it's agriculture, across all of the sectors. We're really working to ensure that these services are provided online to our people, and that really would be beneficial, especially to our brothers and sisters in the hinterland communities, because as you would know, for many little small things like getting a license and so on, they have to travel all the way out of those communities to come into Georgetown just to get those services provided to them. With the 20,000 online scholarships program and the government wanting that to be accessible to all Guyanese across the country, that there with the ICT hubs that I mentioned and the internet connectivity that will be provided, that really helps to ease the burdens, especially for those in the hinterland communities, and provide them with that same opportunity that persons on the coast have, because they'll be equipped with internet connectivity. They can go to the hubs, use the laptops, and it's important for me to mention that these hubs, they are utilizing solar technology systems. So they're being powered by solar technologies, and yeah, really, there's so many things that I can talk about, but I'll stop there for now.
Now, based on the work that's being done by the Office of the Prime Minister, I want to just ascertain if there's an ICT strategy that's in the making. And if there is, can you tell us a bit about that and how that aligns with the plans or the objectives of LCDS 2030?
Okay, so just a few weeks ago, there was the ICT Master Plan 2030 that was launched at the Artichang Conference Center. The president was there, and he spoke a lot about how this is really going to take Guyana and Guyanese into the future. So with that master plan, the idea is to really prepare Guyanese for what is to come. That cuts across all of the sectors, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's agri, it's healthcare. The president spoke numerous times about world-class healthcare being offered in Guyana, where persons are now going to come to Guyana to be treated at specialty hospitals and so forth. Security, the president would have mentioned the digital policing smart systems that will be established. I believe on the new road that was recently opened, that's the Mandela to Eccles Road. Just in the coming weeks, you will see that being implemented there, which now allows for digital ticketing systems for traffic offenses, for example. And that is just a start. So in fighting crimes, which is important for an oil and gas state, we have lots of investors coming here now. Persons are looking for security, not just foreign investors, but our Guyanese citizens as well, who are jumping on the opportunities that are now being provided. So our citizens are looking for safety, improved security, that is, and it is very critical that we get to that stage where we're able to advance our technologies and improve our systems through technology, because technology is the future, right? Education-wise, that is a program that is being pushed aggressively by the Ministry of Education and the government. You would have seen several smart classrooms being launched across the country, and there are more to come. But the president would have shared his vision for where he sees education in the future as it relates to Guyanese. And I was just left to think about, the gaps that we are going to have to fill. I'm fairly young, right? But then when you're talking about, I heard the president talking about primary school students learning to do coding and software development. I mean, I didn't learn programming until high school. So it shows you the huge gap that we're going to have. But then I'm really excited, for my children, my nieces, my nephews that are going to have this opportunity, because it shows you where we're going to be in the future. You're going to have 6 children between the ages of 6 to 12 years old developing software and doing coding, right? So in terms of education, that is an aggressive push there. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your contribution there, Ms. Harris. And indeed, the digital infrastructure really is an important aspect of LCDS. And the consultation aspect, the education that's necessary for Guyanese to understand what this document really means. Ms. Ben, you are lead on the consultations with regard to this document. And I'd just like to get a feel from you first before we go into some of the other questions here. What has the consultation process been like? What are some of the questions Guyanese have been asking? What are some of the places you've been to where you've taken the discussion? And, can you share a bit of the feedback that you've been getting?
Okay. Thank you, Kiana, and thank you for this opportunity to join these ladies to share some more information on the LCDS 2030. Yes, we have commenced, and we are very active within the whole process of building our citizens' awareness and then to inform them on the strategy. As we all know, on the 28th of October, His Excellency the President would have launched this expanded low-carbon development strategy. But during that time, our country was still within the COVID precautions, a lot more than we are today. And so with regard to being able to get out into the communities, do the outreaches, and to engage a lot more, physically, we were restrained in that manner. Notwithstanding, the national consultations did start. And so what happened, it was done in a virtual manner on the Zoom platforms and so on, where lots of meetings were held with various stakeholders and stakeholder groups from November of last year. And so we would have held, meetings with women's groups, youth groups, the private sector, public sector, labor unions, a multitude of stakeholders from across society throughout that process. What was exciting to me was to hear and to engage with the youth and the youth groups, particularly those, for instance, at the University of Guyana, the Bayou Club and the other groups at UG, and to hear, some of the thoughts and the concerns of the young people, and particularly to engage them on how they can see themselves being involved. So that was, to me, the highlights of the national consultation process. But it also did have some face-to-face meetings. So, for instance, the group from the South Rupununi District Council was in Georgetown for meetings for their own purposes, and we had the opportunity to engage with those Tushaus and other representatives from the South Rupununi to give them a presentation of the Office of the President on the LCDS. And the opportunity arose for us as well because they were planning a district council meeting in the South Rupununi, and they invited us. So we were able to go into the South Rupununi to Maruanao and to be able to engage with Tushaus, counselors, women and so on, and youth in the South Rupununi through a kind of a cluster approach. So the meeting was done in Maruanao, one of the villages in the South Rupununi, deep south, and then you had a wide cross-section of persons from over 20 villages in the South Rupununi participating. And so you had elders and women and, persons who were engaged in language and, people within the health sector, education sector, and those kinds of things. So yes, since then, we have been going across the country and having these outreaches, I like to call them, with persons using the same cluster approach, and so we kind of call this the regional consultations now that we have been doing. We have one coming up on Saturday where we'll be in the Maruka sub-district of Region 1, and so we have been quite active in that. So we have been in every region, each of the 10 regions across the country.
Already?
Yes, already. We've been quite busy. And the logistics, as you could imagine, have been quite interesting. To try to get, our country is so beautiful and again so vast, and trying to, understand, even for me who has been working in the field for so many years, not in all of these, in these regions, so to have an understanding and to be able to arrange for persons, who has to come by ATV, who has to get a shuttle to bring them across and so on, has been quite interesting. And also to be able to engage those citizens on those issues that are key and critical to them. So their perspectives has been quite useful. One of the other things I should mention as well is that, first of all, we speak of the consultations, and when President launched it, he gave us 4 months for this consultative process. And so the target, when you look at the draft document, you will see that by April 2022, we're now in May, we should have the finalized document because the consultations ought to have ended in February. Yes, but what occurred was that there has been an extension. And so that has enabled us to, to continue to have these consultations across the regions. As well, with regard to the consultations, we have been fortunate to have the participation of some of the ministers of government. And so it's not just for us sharing the highlights and nitty-gritties of the strategy out of the document, but to have a government minister kind of lay out the policy and the vision of government and make those links with what the strategy is outlining, how it links to the development process, how it is going to be implemented, and to answer questions within that context of persons who have that kind of responsibility. It has been very interesting, I'd say, in a good way, very informative. The communities, the citizens have been very engaged. They're quite keen in getting the feedback and sharing their recommendations and even concerns where they are. So for instance, as well, I should say that the teams that we have going out are multi-agency. So it's not just representatives from the Office of the President, the Department of Environment and Climate Change that's going and speaking of the strategy, but we also have representatives from the Environmental Protection Agency, the Guyana Forestry Commission, the Guyana Geology and Mines, the Ministry of Marine Affairs. And so those issues that are relevant to their respective agencies are addressed by those persons on the team. So it's been quite useful in that aspect. And we continue. Our target is that we hope to close off this round of regional consultations at the end of this month and go into the next round that will be more at a community level. But at this stage, because we need to move forward, we need to be able to garner and to pull together all the recommendations that we've had. It would be remiss of me not to mention as well that the LCDS document is available on the LCDS website. And so even though from the time of the launch, when we couldn't have so many face-to-face meetings, there has always been and continues to be the opportunity for persons to go to the document online, to read it, to make comments live into the document, to email, whatever suggestions or recommendations they have. And so we're also in the process of putting those together and helping to refine the strategy as well so that we can have a final document. And also, where questions have been submitted by various groups and individuals, to also respond to those. It has been quite an active process over these past few months.
Well, that is indeed outstanding. It's good that we have the interest from the citizenry in understanding this document, because it is important to ensuring that we have a future that ensures our development and a transformation that's going to come. It's really going to be unbelievable.
Yeah. But maybe to add though, yes, sure. Because this would be a real gap if I don't mention that it's important for persons to note that the strategy, the document, doesn't only speak to what is intended, what is envisioned between now and 2030, for instance, and our country's future development, but it also gives a report on what has occurred. And so if you look at, the annexes 1 and 2, for instance, Ms. Sharma was speaking about how much money our country would have earned through the Norway agreement. And so we would have earned 212 million US dollars, just about that. And when you add investment income, it goes just above 220 million. So it gives that kind of report. So, when we go out into the communities as well, it's more than just saying it, they can see it in the document. There's also, in the annexes, I believe in page 96 or 97, it gives a list of the various projects that have been identified and agreed to for financing from the funds that have been, earned through the Norway agreement. How much has been allocated, budgeted to each of those projects, how much has been spent, and the status of each project at the end of 2021. And so it's to me, as we speak of what is the intention from 2021 going forward to 2030, it also gives a very good impression of how we performed as a country. How did our citizens benefit? And how important it was, for instance, that these particular projects that were identified under the initial LCDS, how they have been useful and very beneficial in helping to address the key and critical issues that would have been identified, such as the Konya Canal. That was one of the very important projects that was identified to help to alleviate the flooding situation on the coast. The report says how much money was allocated to that, how much was spent, whether the project is completed, and that kind of thing. And a similar manner for the ALT and the micro and small enterprise development and all the other categories. So I thought it's important for me to mention that as well.
No, indeed, and thank you very much for making that known, Ms. Ben. And now on to just another question that I definitely need to ask here is how LCDS fits into the global ambitions on climate change.
Beautifully. Is a one-word answer sufficient? No, seriously though, even if we just look at the 4 main objectives, the 4 pillars of the LCDS, you'll see that one of them, the 4th pillar, speaks about aligning to global initiatives, those multilateral environmental agreements that we have committed to as a country and so on. So your sustainable development goals, the leaders pledge, the Aichi development, the Aichi protected areas, those commitments, the Aichi biodiversity targets and so on. So they align very well to those, and not only the narrative that is in the document and the intent that is elaborated in it, not only does it's not superficial, it gives a very good concept of how not only the alignment, but how these specific actions will be implemented. And so I think it's quite useful in that way.
Thank you, Ms. Ben. Now, there's something called the Guyana Climate Resilience Strategy and Action Plan. Can you tell us a bit about this document and how it works, how it meshes with the objectives of LCDS, where we are in terms of implementation? Okay.
So the climate resilience and CRSAP, I always get tongue-tied kind of calling it, would have started around 2013, 2014, I believe. And it was financed with funding through, our agreement with Norway. And it was implemented through, the plan was developed through the Office of the President at that time, with support from Conservation International. And so in the initial stages, there was kind of an assessment and a kind of a stock taking that was done. And then the whole process of developing or drafting a plan was implemented. The plan, the CRSAP plan, is in the process of being updated.
Okay.
Because since then, I'm speaking of 2014 and 2015, we would have announced first oil. We're now an oil-producing country. The oil and gas sector is not included in that. So that needs to be included. Okay. And also, there are other aspects of the other, sectors that have moved on, and there's more information. So the process of updating it is ongoing, as well as ensuring that all the aspects of it, how it speaks to our adaptation. And the adaptation is one of the key and critical aspects of our overall strategy as well. How the two align very smoothly, because it speaks essentially to our national adaptation plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we've heard a lot about the vision of LCDS to ensure we market continue the marketing of our forest services and even tap the ecosystem services programs. But do we have an idea of how much we're likely to make, given how the market has expanded now? We're not looking at just bilateral agreements, but we're looking at, all the other companies and whatnot who are part of this market. Do we have an idea of how much we could possibly make?
You're asking for a figure.
Yes.
I don't have a figure for you. Yeah, she wants to put me on the spot. Yeah, so I mean, as I said a short while ago, over the 5-year period through the Norway agreement, we would have earned, when we added the investment income, about 220 million. Yeah, at that time, there wasn't a market where, as a country, we could have been kind of marketing these credits that we have. Since then, and since particularly since 2020, 2021 in particular, late last year, we would have applied for, and because the process has evolved, and the facilities and mechanisms to enable countries like ours to be able to put and market our credits are now evolving and more or less in place. And so we as a country have been going through the process of preparedness, I'd say, is the best way. So making the application to be able to be a participant in this process.
Okay.
And so the application first in 2021, inclusive of meeting the requirements of the submission of the various documents. And then subsequent to that, and in more recent times, a kind of an assessment on the ground by independent auditors, if you will, to come into the country and see what we have submitted as documents and what we're reporting as a country, to kind of verify them and to kind of test their accuracy. So we have just gone through that process within the last, I'd say, 3 weeks.
Okay.
And now we are waiting, I say we, all of us as a country, we're waiting on the report of the auditors,
Okay.
and that will help us to be able to put our credits based on, this report that comes out of these independent assessors, to be able to put these credits that we have as a country on the market, on what is called a register, so that international, corporate organizations, other countries, other Norway, Sweden, whatever country is also interested, can engage with us and to get into another agreement. So, first of all, I'd say we're not at the stage where we can market as yet, but hopefully within, let's say, the third quarter, in the next quarter, the real thing is to be able to await that report that will enable us to be able to get to that stage, to put the credits on the market. Also important to note is that, the Norway agreement essentially would have done an assessment up to 2015.
Okay.
And so, but our forests and the fantastic services that our forests provided continue to sequester carbon dioxide. And so continue to be a sink and to continue to provide this service to the world. So what Guyana is also saying is that the credits that we intend to put on the market doesn't start from now, as in 2021. We have registered our intent to market those services that we have provided from 2016 onward.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's calculated at about 37 million credits for this period between 2016, let's say 2020, 2021, and then to go through the process again of kind of a verification to be able to do this kind of marketing now in real time, which will be about 8 to 10 million credits annually.
Okay.
To speak to, because I know that you'll probably say I haven't answered your questions. I know how you journalists are. The agreement with Norway was $5 US per ton. Okay. Since then, the market, and it's I won't say volatile, but it's how these market systems work. So it has increased over the period, but it is one that that fluctuates. And so, like late 2021 and early this year, it was like $11 per ton. So more than double what we would have earned and what we would have been able to negotiate for it, for the first agreement. But unfortunately, with the crisis in Ukraine, that has had an adverse effect on the market. And so the price has kind of fallen to about $10. But it is something that my colleagues who are part of the LCDS team, you would have interviewed Padipa. She's one of the persons who is the leading lights on this, keeps monitoring it every day to see what the prices are so that we have a good idea of when we are ready. We have a better impression and we're better informed of how we can market these credits for the benefit of our country.
Thank you very much for that contribution there, Ms. Benham. Before we wrap up, I just want to talk a bit about the importance of LCDS as it relates to our agriculture sector, because it has been such a major contributor to the economic well-being of the nation, and it is also one of those sectors that's very vulnerable. And we've seen that over the years, the devastating impacts of climate change on the agricultural sector, how much we've lost. How does LCDS propose to use funds to strengthen or protect and prevent some of the revenue loss that we've seen over the years?
Okay, right. So in many ways, it's a short answer. So for instance, I mentioned the Konya Canal. So drought and flood management is one key and critical aspect. And maybe we were talking a short while ago of the adaptation aspect of one of the main pillars and the CRSAP. So addressing drought and flood management. So not only, a lot of times we think of, we've had, as you mentioned, the devastating effect of floods 2005 and so on, and in recent years, in recent months actually, how we have been so hard hit. But also we need to remember as well that we have those instances where there's the El Nino and those periods where you have severe drought and the importance of water for agriculture and for all the other purposes. So drought and flood management. So as you would recall, this budget that would have been passed for this year, the national budget, would have included 2 new canals. And I like to refer to them as 2 more Konya canals, so they help us with flood management and that thing on the coast, Region 2, Region 6. So that's one thing. Second thing, also helps to build resilience within the agriculture sector, looking at risk assessment, insurance for farmers. I like to say, because my background is in agriculture, I should mention. So also looking at those other things that, you can speak of resilience within a broad aspect. But within the context of climate change, global warming, how does that affect your agriculture sector? How does that affect farmers? So increase in pests and diseases, increase in salinity in the soil, and how do you manage that and help farmers to be able to, to be able to overcome and to adapt to those kinds of things. Helping to do, more kind of climate smart agriculture, and mangrove restoration is key and critical in that as well. And also our, coastal infrastructure. Once we have, because we all know that we're below sea level, and so unless we can have an intact protection from these rising sea levels, so improve and correct and heighten in areas or sea defenses, both the green and gray infrastructure, and so funds that the intent is to be allocated through and earned from this new LCDS and, from the marketing of our carbon credits, will go to these critical aspects of helping our agriculture sector to be able to be more as resilient and to help our farmers to adapt to these vagaries in the climate. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Ms. Ben. And now we've reached the conclusion of the program. Unfortunately, it's like the time flew by so quickly. So just to offer each guest an opportunity to provide closing remarks on just what your thoughts are about LCDS 2030 and your how you feel about the impact that it's going to make on current and future generations. And exactly where we started, I'll go back to Ms. Sharma. I'll hand the mic over to you. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. I think we are in exciting times, and LCDS 2030 just, makes it all that even more exciting to see where our nation is going and the role that, we each can play in achieving, our goals as a nation and moving forward. I think LCDS 2030 looks beyond the oil and gas. That's the buzz right now, oil and gas economy, but it really takes us beyond that and to prepare ourselves for post oil and gas. And so I think that is what actually, excites me a lot. And I think, Guyana is just, on the up and up now. And I think as Guyanese, we all have that opportunity, and it's for us to make good of it.
Thank you, Ms. Sharma. Ms. Harris, what are your thoughts and what are your perspectives on LCDS 2030 and the impact it's going to have on the lives of citizens?
So what is important for Guyanese to note is that, as Ms. Sharma mentioned, it's not just about the oil and gas economy. This LCDS is framed in such a way that Guyanese from all sectors, regardless of which sector you're in, whether it's agriculture or tourism, no matter what, you're able to really reap the benefits of the earnings, I would say, because as we know that what we're doing is really marketing our forests. Guyana is a forested country, and we can gain from that, where the rest of the world would have taken part. And I like to say that they actually contributed to the problems that we're having now in climate change. Guyana has a large percentage of its forests intact, and it is only fair that we're able to earn from that, because we're not protecting ourselves but the rest of the planet as well.
Yes.
They would have been able to advance their economies because of deforestation. They have their skyscrapers and large investments, but we need to ensure that while we're protecting the planet and we're ensuring that we reduce, Guyana doesn't have a large percentage to reduce in deforestation because so much of our forest is still there, but ensuring that we don't lose out on the development of our people and our country. So I want to encourage the Guyanese out there to go on the LCDS website, take the time and go through to see what the document entails. And as this is a national consultation, every person can be a part of this. You are able to put your comments there and share your ideas so that it's taken into consideration. So nobody should feel left out. The opportunity is there. It's just for you to grasp it. And there are really many opportunities, as I said, for Guyanese all across the hinterland communities, especially. For me, I believe that they're the ones that are really going to benefit a lot from this, but we're ensuring that all across Guyana that Guyanese have equal opportunities and access to whatever services and benefits that can be reaped from the LCDS 2030.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Ms. Ben, for your closing remarks, please.
Okay. So yes, indeed, as Ms. Harris just said, it's very important for our citizens to share their feedback, to share whatever recommendations they have, things they would like to see added, considered in the strategy. I should say as well that, this is an expanded strategy in many ways. So we spoke about the global commitments we have. Initially, the first iteration of the LCDS focused a lot on just the forest, and how do we help to address those things that were so related, and spoke about our indigenous people. Now the strategy is expanded that speaks about Amerindian and hinterland development being allocated 15% of the revenue earned, so 15 cents from every dollar. It also looks at doing everything against biodiversity loss. It speaks about the ocean economy. It speaks about, so many other areas that, may have benefited from or would have gotten some support from the first version, but in a lot more detail, and I think with a lot more attention. so that it's really says, one of my colleagues, Kevin Hogan, always says that the LCDS, the D in the acronym is the important part. It is a development strategy for our country. And it speaks, not only, there's a lot of buzzword about the oil and gas sector,
Yes.
but it speaks to agricultural development, it speaks to the improvement of our health sectors, it speaks about so many other things. Vanelda was speaking about the ICT and e-governance and so on. So important for everyone to be part of this process of review, sharing their feedback. I'm excited about it, as you probably could tell. And I think that it's quite cutting edge. And it's something that I'm particularly proud of. I don't know if I can say this, but I'm particularly proud of as a Guyanese to be involved in a process that like this that is so, so kind of forward thinking, and so kind of, yes, it is an overarching strategy, but it pulls so many aspects of our country's development together, so that it looks at our future, the future of our country, and to help the improvement of the lives of every family in a very critical way, and in every aspect of our future as a country. And for that, I think it's important for us to be aware of it, to be involved in it, to be supportive of it, and to share whatever ideas we have to make it better.
Ms. Ben, Ms. Harris, and Ms. Sharma, I really want to thank you very much for participating in tonight's discussion, because while the program is called Guyana's Oil and You, without a vision that ensures we don't fall into this trap of being totally dependent on the oil and gas revenues, the development that we hope to really get out of the oil revenues, it's not going to come. And I think it's really important for us to have these discussions to really educate citizens about having that balance. Yes, oil and gas is there, but we still need to ensure we prepare for that transition. And I'm really happy that you guys really took the time to participate in this discussion, because it's really important. So once again, Ms. Ben, Sharma, Harris, thank you so much to our listeners and viewers on Facebook Live, YouTube, and wherever you may be overseas. Thank you so much for being present. And with that said, I'd like to thank you for taking part in the discussion, commenting, and sending your perspectives, your messages, etc. Please continue to stay safe and do have a good evening. Ladies, do have a good evening, and thanks again.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kiana.
Kiana.
It's been good. Thank you.